G'day, welcome to Does It Matter? Look, all over the world there are increasing amounts of riots and disturbances and internecine difficulties, and they are civil disruptions. And they seem to be emerging over, it primarily seems to be migrants and issues with migrants, but it's far, far more than that. We have had governments that for at least 2.5 decades have increasingly been catering to the big end of town, while regulation for the wealthier members of the market and society has decreased, while they've been able to run rampant. So what if they get fined every now and then? It's a drop in the ocean for them. They're able to do what they want. Due to globalization and due to the international nature of trade, they're often untouchable in many traditional respects. In the meantime, while these bully boy corporate cronyism has just spread its tentacles like a fucking cancer across the planet, ruining capitalism, destroying free markets, ruining competition, creating monopolies everywhere, what have we had? We've had increasing attempts of nanny state bullshit by the same governments who are supposed to be protecting us from their rich mates, and that's it. That's very clearly what it is. No, they're here to keep us quiet. They're here to keep us docile, to domesticate these disturbed citizens and make sure that they shut the fuck up and do as they're told. That's exactly what Labor and Liberal both want. They want us to shut up, stop complaining, and do as we're told. In the back rooms of the political parties, I guarantee those conversations are occurring. The classist patronisation that is going on at this point in time is staggering. The reality is Australians, and indeed all over the world, common working class, middle class citizens are being sold down the river by their own governments. The people we elect to take care of us. We elect to practice wisdom, wise policy. They're not sapiens, not wise at all. No, they're very unwise people who are looking at the feathering their own nest and looking after their own classist bias, looking after their mates. Their kids don't go to school with our kids. Okay? They don't socialise and hobnob with us. They socialise and hobnob with the rich, the powerful, the wealthy, the lobbyists. And so do their children. They're corrupt. They're corrupt in a way that beggars description. And it's everywhere. And now they're going to censor the internet and force ID across the internet to protect children. The inconsistency of our laws. They say they want to protect children, and yet so many of the laws that they've created have destabilised families, destabilised communities, have impoverished families. That's not protecting children. When one wage can't buy a home anymore, can't support a family anymore, when two wages are struggling to do what one wage did 20 years ago, how is that protecting children? It puts children at far more risk than seeing some porn on the internet. For fuck's sake, priorities. It's an excuse. They're not interested in protecting children. They're not interested in the things they claim they're doing it for. They're interested in putting their boots on our neck. They're interested in crushing any dissent. And it doesn't matter whether they're left or right. Authoritarianism is itself its own movement. It moves into the left and into the right very easily because the people there start off believing that they're right. And thus anything can be justified if you're right, if you're protecting the kids, if you're protecting women, you're protecting whatever groups you think are precious, then anything can be justified. If you're protecting your religious Sharia law, or you're protecting your Christian mates, or whoever it is, it doesn't matter because you're now justified. You have a moral imperative to rationalise your blatant bias. That's what's happening. We know it. It doesn't take a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon to see what's happening. And as a people everywhere, working class and middle class people have to rise up. We have to rise up. We have to say no fucking no. We're not submitting to your rules. Fuck you. We're not going to submit to your rules. And you are going to represent us. We shouldn't be in an era where so many countries are now struggling with ailing job markets, which have been declining for years. They hide how bad the job markets are in the plethora of gig jobs and part-time jobs that have flooded into the market. They hide the number of jobs that no longer offer overtime. So we don't realize how much instability is in the job market, far less than there used to be, which means it can support less people at a particular lifestyle. It can support far less people at the lifestyle we were used to for decades. So the job market is much worse than we think it is, and it's going to get far, far worse with robotics and AI kicking in right now. On top of that, we have housing crises. We don't have enough houses being built, and even when we do, property owners land bank and reserve properties. Property reserving and land banking by the developers just locks up the market tight so prices don't shift, or if they do shift, they move up because they're controlling supply. When will we learn human beings rig games? We ultimately game every system we get. And the land developers, the realtors, and the landowners, right down to the person who owns one investment home, they're all to some degree gaming the system for their own personal benefit. And you can understand that. It's human nature. Governments are supposed to know better. They're supposed to know better. Banks are supposed to know better. But they all play the role. And as a result, less and less people, 70% of the people under 40 are locked out of the housing market. Locked out. They're not going to have a house. They're going to be renting forever. And the rental market, it's not like the European market here, which has long-term rentals. We don't have long-term. We don't have 10, 15, 20-year rentals here. We don't have it. You're lucky to get a 2-year rent. You're very lucky to get a 2-year lease in residential. People are being squeezed in so many ways. The cost of living, the most expensive electricity prices in the world, some of the highest food prices in the world, yet we're one of the 3 largest food producers on the planet. It's insane. Why are we paying so much for our own food, our own gas, coming from our own gas fields that we send overseas to be refined and then buy back? Whose idea was that? What governments agreed to that? Several did actually, state and federal. Why are we being completely gulled into things that only work for the top 5%? 5% if that, are taking most of this. Fortune 500 companies have seen record profits for close to 2 decades consecutively. That's almost unheard of. Why are we having a cost of living crisis then? If there's so much money and so much profit, mining's booming, everything's booming, why do we have so much less money? Why is there so much less of the fruits of productivity for human beings engaged in market value? Why? It's not fucking hard to work out. We just don't control the means of distribution. We don't control the means of production, and we don't control the means of distribution, which I think is even more important. We don't have a say in how it's distributed. We don't get a say because the governments that are supposed to mediate those things have stepped completely back and played laissez-faire to the point where the monopolists and the crony capitalists are stitching everyone up. Small business being crushed. Medium style business is being crushed. Anyone who's not deeply capitalized and connected is going to get squeezed to death by these people or bought out. If they're smart, they'll sell. while they have something worth selling. But they will destroy you if they can't buy you out, and people know that. And that's the world we live in. This is the economy we live in. No one can afford anything anymore. It's growing increasingly desperate. And more people are just going on holidays that they can barely afford, buying lots and lots of pleasures that, again, they can barely afford because there doesn't seem to be much of a future otherwise. This is not the way a healthy society functions, with no long-term hopes or dreams or plans for the future. 50% of our youth will never have kids. That's very likely now. 50%. We're looking at a 50% population drop in the next 25 years. I don't think the average person understands what that means. It's not a little thing. It's a catastrophically enormous thing that will smash our economies to dust. We're not made for that kind of change. The average amount of change the human being is seeing today dwarfs anything in history. Psychologically, physiologically, and economically, we cannot sustain this level of change without consequences. Now, I think some of those changes are inevitable. Some of the technological changes are unavoidable. But what happens is social policy is supposed to adjust along the way to compensate for and adjust for the changes that society is going through technologically. I see very little of that. I see more and more homelessness, less and less quality of services, degrading of our infrastructure, degrading of our public services, and a complete, absolute entropy in wages for the 70%, the bottom 70%. Just completely, just abandoned by the people they pay to look after them in government. So yeah, I'm pissed off. You should be pissed off too. If you're not pissed off, you're a damn fool. And you heard it from me. You should be furious. It's a fact. I'm not spitting theory here. This is an opinion. I'm not some rabid ideologue. I don't believe in anything except facts and sound reasoning. Okay? I like capitalism. I think it works really well. It could work better. At the moment, it's working worse. I like democracy. I like multiculturalism. But I think in all those areas we're having problems because people aren't listening, and people aren't being, especially at the top, are not listening. The ideologues have got it into their head that extremities are good. The middle path, as the Buddha said, is always the best way. We should be calming ourselves down. We should be not bringing in anywhere near the amount of migrants we're bringing in. All it's doing is continuing to force wages down. Our wages are being forced down. Okay? The globalists and the crony capitalists have done everything they can to force our wages down for the better part of 30 years. And they have succeeded in a variety of ways. And some of it was inevitable, like the flooding of the workforce with women. That was inevitable because who wouldn't want to have a wage? Who wouldn't want to have more independence? It's a powerful thing to offer people autonomy and greater levels of autonomy. Human beings naturally seek out autonomy. Okay, and that creates its own problems because even good things create problems. That's the other thing. We can't have conversations today because if you mention how something good can have negative effects, people don't want to hear about it. Well, fucking grow up. Grow up. Things I love and care about that I think are positive have had terrible effects on some people. And if I didn't acknowledge that, I would be a fool as well. And I try not to be too much of a fool. The reality is that's the way life is. And we all need to grow up. We all need to mature a little, put our thinking caps on, calm down our emotions, breathe, and think about what is going to be best in the medium to long term. Not just what's good right for now for you. And what's good just for you isn't necessarily good for everyone else. If you think you're doing something that's going to be really good for you with your 4 houses or your 5 houses, and your daisy-chained negative geared properties, I want you to understand the effect that has on the rest of society and is having right now. I want you to understand what it will mean for you in your retirement with all these properties that you're going to sell or continue to rent out. Nothing good. You won't have what you think you'll have then. You won't. It won't be what you think it is or what you think it's going to be. The same with migration, flooding the country with endless migrants that we seem to be very poorly vetting in many cases. We're placing increasing pressure on our infrastructure, our schools, our hospitals, our housing, in an already existing cost of living crisis. As a working class man, I can tell you now, the people above us, the people even slightly above us, have no fucking clue how hard it is. They have no idea how juggly we've all gotten. They have no idea. They don't live like that. They don't touch on that. You know, even Albanese, coming from his working class backgrounds, just bought a $4.5 million home with his millionaire girlfriend. Sorry, he's not part of our group anymore. He's not. He's in the rarefied heights of the hobnobs, and he is. How could he not be? I don't even blame him entirely. But the reality is that once people get into these rarefied heights and they're rubbing shoulders with nothing but rich lobbyist after rich lobbyist and poly after poly with their 5 to 15 properties, how are they going to think like us? How are they going to relate to us? And the problem is that they need to, because the economy is still largely driven by just normal people. It's not driven by the rich and the powerful. They make enormous changes and they make good directional changes and they add inputs that are significant. But overall, it's just people living their lives that drives the economy. Just ordinary folk. And the rich and the political class seem to have forgotten this. And they need to remember it now, ASAP, before there's blood in the streets. Before there's rampant violence. It's started to happen in Spain, in UK, because the governments there have not been listening to legitimate grievances by lots and lots of the people, majority of the people there. It's only going to get worse if we don't start inflicting our will upon the governments that we've elected. We have to. We have no choice. I don't want this to come to Australia. What I'm seeing in Spain, in UK and elsewhere, I don't want to come to Australia. We need to make very careful. We need to radically diminish our migrant program for the meantime. Okay? And I don't like saying that lightly because as a child who came here as a migrant, I'm deeply appreciative of the opportunity. I also know that the numbers of people coming across who are damaged, who are traumatized, does not serve our country well at all. The services that we offer them when they do get here is not enough. It's not enough. But the problem is we also have our own Indigenous peoples here, our own native peoples. All of us are native if we were born here or we've lived here for decades. They're not being looked after either. Where's our housing? Where's our cheap and affordable housing? Where are large banks of public housing for young people to move into? For older people to retire into if they're not homeowners? Where is the affordability built into society, a compassionate and rational society, to prevent most of the wealth funneling into the landlord kulak class and leaving nothing for our small businesses, nothing for our medium-scale businesses? It's no accident that banks and large corporations have bought into every staple economy, food, power, electricity, petrol, those things, accommodation, housing. It's no accident that they've bought deeply into those things, war, defense, because they're things that have perpetual budgets. People have to have those things. Every country has to have a defense budget. It looks like there's going to be a bigger demand for that in the future. Like everyone has to have homes. Everyone has to have somewhere to live, housing, food, electricity, internet. So these things are not subject to the same degree of market forces as every other consumer good and service. They're not optional. You have to have them. And as a result, they create monopolies, bottlenecks. And the government is there to mandate that, to make sure they do not take advantage. That's where price controls are necessary. That's where regulation is necessary. That's where, no, you can raise the rent by inflationary index only, a few dollars a year. You're not allowed to raise it 30, 40, 50, 60 bucks a week every year. You're not allowed to do that because that would be vastly ahead of the cost of living. And banks shouldn't be allowed to buy properties wholesale. Currently, our major banks control over 44% of housing. That's not mortgages, they own those houses and they're renting them out through their own agents. Outrageous. Talk about rigging the market. Our rich people are gaming the system. They're letting themselves in through the door and locking it behind them so no one else can get in. Door slammers. Yeah. That's the banks. That's the politicians. If we don't do something about them, we're looking at a return within the next 20 years of neo-feudalism. They're going to enslave us. They want to identify everything you're looking at, everything you're seeing. They want to control everything you're doing. And they're going to use every excuse under the sun, including child protection, to do it. If they want to do these things, they better be damn well giving us a lot more for what we're getting. We're not getting a value for money. Where's my generous UBI? Where's a job guarantee that guarantees a generous paying job that gives people a chance to live decently? Where's free education? Where's an amazing world-class health system we used to have, we don't have anymore? Where is our burgeoning infrastructure? Where are our rich communities thriving because parents don't need to work their ass off constantly until they're 70 in order to have a decent life, or even somewhat of a frugally decent life? They've been stolen. They've stolen it from us and expect us to quietly bend our heads and go into servitude. Let's not do that. Let's cause some trouble. Let's cause some shit for our own sakes and for our children's sakes. Oos.